Hello, Johannes. Good evening.
Good evening, Harman.
Welcome to our second podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, we had quite a wonderful and positive response to our first podcast. I'm sure you received some feedback on the podcast.
Yes.
I received emails, I received messages through Facebook, even through YouTube, and everybody seemed to like the content of the first podcast, which is very encouraging. Because we like to work with the input from our viewers, and we need the input from our viewers as well. We also received questions about the I Ching. We also received some mails and messages about questions to the I Ching. And yeah, and but I want to make this clear that during the podcast, we will not discuss personal consultations of people who have consulted the I Ching and ask us to interpret the answer from the I Ching. Like, well, I consulted the I Ching about my relationship and I don't understand the answer. Please help me before I'm getting divorced. Something like that. And we're not going to do that because that's not the aim of our podcast, isn't it, Johannes? I mean,
It isn't.
No, it isn't. We're not going to do personal consultations or private consultations through our podcast. We want to discuss the I Ching and the usage of the I Ching, and also how it relates to Johannes, how you are using the I Ching with your 9-star key, etc. But just working on personal consultations, that's not the aim of this podcast. What can be interesting, though, is that we received one question of someone who gave us a personal consultation, an example of it, and wondered how the text and the hexagram can work together in an interpretation. Okay, you can interpret the hexagram in this way, you can interpret the text in that way. How am I going to reconcile the two? Because in my view, the two seem to clash. So help me with how do I use that? And then we're talking about the principle, how you can use the I Ching and interpret the answers. But we're not going to discuss private sessions. There are a lot of discussion boards on internet for that. There's on Facebook, there's a group, several groups where you can post your own personal consultations. But we want to focus on the usage of the I Ching and everything that's connected to that usage, and discuss certain ideas about the I Ching. And we can't do that only through these personal consultations. So I'm sorry for those people who sent us these personal consultations. We're not going to do anything with it. Sorry about that. But if you have questions about the I Ching or something else that we discussed during the podcast, then by all means, send us a message. We also now have, if everything goes all right technically, we have the chat function. So you can watch this video, even though you're not watching it live. There is the chat function that you can use to immediately respond to something that I am saying. So when I'm saying hello, then you can immediately now respond in the chat by saying hello, and we will see that later, and we'll also receive a message about that. So that's a very novel way of interacting with our podcast. Did I say that correctly, Johannes?
Yes, you said it clearly and correctly. But if everybody is saying hello, we get a shitload of emails. So please, for everybody who's watching, if you have a comment on something, please make it worthwhile. That's just a good question, and so we can answer it and we can work with it.
Yes.
So everything you chat, we get an email. So you can think we get a lot of emails, Harman. So
I think so. If everything goes all right, we will receive a lot of emails, but we can filter these out. And the interesting things, if there are questions, we will discuss these questions during a future podcast.
Absolutely.
I can't promise which podcast, but your input is not wasted. Definitely not.
Definitely not. We read every chat. we read every email, and it were definitely interesting emails we got from last podcast. But definitely what you said, some things are very personal. How can you do this? And that's more definition on a personal side. That's not our ways of doing things in this podcast.
No. So that's about the how we're going to do the podcasts in the future. And Johannes, for today, we have several topics on our list. But of course, these topics are all connected. I mean, our podcast is just like the I Ching, everything is connected. And you proposed a certain topic at the end of the first podcast, and that isn't recorded, but you said, well, actually, I want to talk about the Baoti.
Yes.
And I think that is a concept that most general users don't have a clue about. But when we talk about Baoti, and the funny thing is that when we talk about that, we always use the Chinese word Baoti. I don't think it as, we translate it sometimes as enveloping trigrams, surrounding trigrams, something like that. But most of the time we simply use the Chinese term. We talk about Baoti. We're becoming half Chinese, I think, Johannes. So we always talk about Baoti and never, hardly ever about enveloping trigrams.
No.
Maybe that's because it's too many syllables, but Baoti is just 2 syllables. That's easy to pronounce. But the Baoti, maybe it's an idea if I explain first what Baoti actually are.
Yes. Please. Yes.
So I'll see if this is going to work. I'm going to start a whiteboard because then I can draw hexagrams. Hoping that this is going to work. Participants can now see your whiteboard. Oh, thank you. That's very convenient. Format. I'm going to choose blue as a color and a thick pen. Okay, let's draw a hexagram. This is just a random hexagram. Really, it is. It doesn't say anything about me or my situation. It is just a random hexagram that I just write down. Well, when we look at a hexagram, most people I hope, are aware of the basic trigrams, the 2 primary trigrams that make up a hexagram. You have the lower trigram, in this case, fire, and the upper trigram is wind. And if you're not familiar with trigrams, well, I'm sure that your own I Ching translation will mention these trigrams. So take your own translation, because most translations, just like the Chinese original I Ching books, they always start with mentioning the trigram. So the 2 parts, each part's made of 3 lines, and together they make a hexagram. And most people are familiar with these basic trigrams, just 2 trigrams stacked together. But there are more trigrams hidden in a hexagram. And a concept that several users will be familiar with, because Richard Wilhelm talks about it in his translation, especially in the 3rd book. He mentions the nuclear trigrams, the Hugua. We have here a nuclear trigram. That's line 2. Whoops, that's a 2. That's supposed to be a 2, and a 3 and a 4. That's a nuclear trigram. And we also have another trigram, nuclear trigram, there. So we have a nuclear trigram water there, and we have a nuclear trigram fire. Oh, that's immediately getting interesting. Interesting hexagram. Well, there are only interesting hexagrams, of course. So the nuclear trigrams are sometimes combined to a nuclear hexagram. They're put together and then you get a new hexagram. That's how many people here in the West use nuclear trigrams, which is a fine principle. But now we're getting to the Baoti, because these nuclear trigrams, I'm going to write it down again to make the picture clear. The same hexagram. And then we have here this nuclear trigram water. And there are lines surrounding that nuclear trigram water, namely line 1, 5, and 6. And you can put these lines together, just put them together, and then you have a trigram. And that trigram is a Baoti trigram. It's a surrounding trigram. That trigram, heaven in this case, surrounds this trigram water. Mm-hmm. And since we have another nuclear trigram, fire, here, that trigram is also surrounded by 3 other lines, which is in this case this line and that line and that line, and that makes another trigram, fire. So here we have an upper nuclear trigram, fire, which is surrounded by a Baoti trigram, fire. Well, this idea of surrounding trigrams, that is the topic, one of the topics of this podcast. So, and it is something that my students will know about it because I teach them, but there aren't really any books here in the West that they really discuss Baoti trigrams and the practical usage of it. So it's a fairly new concept. And in the first podcast, I said that I only use old principles when I teach the I Ching. I go back to the as much as possible to the source and to the oldest usage of the I Ching and usage of trigrams. Well, this is an exception because the Baoti is actually a relatively late development in the history and philosophy of the I Ching, but I personally find it a very useful concept, because it helps you to work a little bit more with the nuclear trigrams. But Johannes, it was your idea to work with the Baoti. I'm going to stop the screen sharing now.
Yeah.
And why did you want to discuss this interesting concept of the Baoti?
Let me go back a couple of years ago. You introduced me to the Baoti. You were just starting to get to know them. And you messaged me, and so we got into that, and we had quite a discussion about it and wrote about it to each other. And I was getting really interested in the Baoti, and especially the way you saw it, like enveloping and like something that is pressing in someone. Because I meet lots of people with my consultations, I thought, well, let's use the Baoti and try it out. Okay, what's your deepest insights? What's your deepest feelings? Because for me, the nuclear trigrams and nuclear hexagrams are very important in my work. Okay, but if Baoti can press it down, what does that mean? And so I was very encouraged asking you how to bring this upon a question I had from a student of mine, but not a very personal question. It was a very big question.
Yeah.
And let's start with that, and then we go on. But I'm very interested in how we can discuss the Baoti from that, and also the other topics. But let me start with the question, and then go on in the hexagram and further on. Is that okay with you?
Yes, fine. Yes, excellent. Fine. Yes.
Okay. The question of a student of mine at the beginning of 2020, well, some people are getting the feeling now, but it was just January. So in Holland, nothing was really going on, but the student of mine felt, okay, there's something going on with this COVID virus, but everything was still quite low. And she asked me, can you ask the Jing about what's going to happen with this virus and upon the world? My answer was immediately, of course, you can ask everything. You can even ask where your socks are. Yes. It doesn't matter. I have recently found the stuffed animal of my child with the I Ching. So you can ask everything. But I said to her, this is the first classes. I don't think it's really interesting or too big now for this class, because it's also political, highly political.
Okay, yeah.
And I want to teach people personally. No? But everyone was gone. I thought, well, it was quite an interesting question. So let us go back to January 2020. Nothing was going on. And I thought, really, well, that is going to be fine. And then I threw the G. What is this COVID thing is going to do to the world? That was my question. And I received an answer. And I will share a screen.
Yeah, that you asked what the virus will do to the world. There are users who will say, oh, but that's a question about the future. You can't ask questions about the future. What are you doing, Johannes? No, that's not what the I Ching is meant for. No,
I know. And you're one of the persons. I know.
Well, yeah, well, no, not. Well, let's put a little bit more detail into that. I have nothing against questions about future. You can, after all, as you said, you can ask anything you want.
Yeah.
So even questions about the future, that's perfectly fine. However, it is my personal opinion that the I Ching will only tell you, give a hexagram that is related to the here and now. Every hexagram that you get, even when you ask a question about future, says something about the here and now. That's the only thing the I Ching can do, tell you how the current situation is. However, if you understand the current situation, then you hopefully also know how it will develop and what the proper course of action is. And when you know the proper course of action, you probably also know where it will all go to. So that is how I see the I Ching. I don't really have anything against questions about the future, but I think the I Ching answers even these questions by telling you how the current situation is. But anyway, that's just about me. It's this is your
No. I'm totally with you here because when you cast, it's a time of casting now.
Yes.
But my question was, how will this evolve itself through the world? So that was my question. Okay. It's not my questions that I usually ask to the I Ching. I don't really ask questions about the future, but this was something about the future.
Yes.
Yeah? And what will it mean? What is this? What will it do? Yeah. There's no easy way around this, Harman. I will just give it.
Say it
okay,
like it is.
Okay. Hexagram 49.
Yeah.
Revolution. That was quite okay. I will get into this hexagram quite a bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think, immediately can relate to this hexagram when they see the name revolution, and when they think about the last period and everything that happened through this stupid virus. I think many people will say, yes, that's what happened, revolution.
Yeah, but bear in mind, it was only at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
That is an interesting answer. I immediately thought, okay, this is not just a walk through the park.
No.
But what made it a longer walk through the park was this. There were 5 changing lines.
5 moving lines.
Yeah.
5 change. Oh God.
I call it changing lines. You call it moving lines.
Whatever.
Yeah. They are underway, and this is quite something.
You always have to exaggerate, Johannes.
Yeah, I never casted a hexagram with so many changing lines. I think we both agree on the topic that the more changing lines, the more a situation is way out of balance.
Yes.
Because it needs such getting back to balance on every level of the situation.
Yes, I see moving lines as lines that are too much yin or too much yang, and too much means that they are out of balance. That line is unbalanced, and also the trigram that has these moving lines of trigrams, these are unbalanced as well. That is a topic that I sometimes have discussions with other people who also use the I Ching, and they think that seeing moving lines as unbalanced, they think it's a little bit a narrow-minded view of moving lines, but it works perfectly well for me. So
now when it comes to when you take this on a personal level and astrological, you will see that the whole system is out of balance, but there is a lot of systems that's going on. And so it's also a time of opportunity.
Yes.
But Hexagram 94 isn't a walk through the park, but with 5 changing lines. I thought immediately, this is gonna take a long walk, because these trigrams are way out of balance. But what are these trigrams? But let us see firstly, if we change all these lines, because many people do that when changing lines, then we get hexagram 7. It's called army. So I had revolution and army. I don't know about you, Harman, but I was a little bit distressed at that moment. But I also want to discuss a little bit, because there are many people who are working with the changes and then see the second hexagram as, what's coming. I don't know about you, but I don't see it like that way. They're just two sides of the coin.
Yes, there is the tendency, and that is something that I still see in many I Ching books, to see the second hexagram as the future. That is where everything is going, and that also that can be, well, a little bit dangerous. I want to show an example of this, how this can be dangerous. I'm going to get back to the whiteboard here. I'm sorry, Johannes. I'm taking over for a moment.
If it works, I don't know.
Yes, because I want to show.
I have to stop share then, maybe.
Yeah, well, you automatically stopped sharing, I think, because now I am screen sharing.
Oh, I don't see your whiteboard.
You don't?
No.
Oh, so, I here it says you are screen sharing. So.
Okay, let me just stop my share.
Yeah, that's okay. So,
and you can go on.
Participants can now see my whiteboards. This is what it says here. So
participants cannot. Yeah.
You see my whiteboard now?
Yeah, I see it now.
Because I want to show an example of what I see happen with people who are mainly beginners with I Ching. Suppose someone throws hexagram 36.
36. Yep.
Yes. The darkening of the light.
Oh, we're going all to die.
Oh. Oh, that is such a negative hexagram. But wait, I have this line moving. So this hexagram changes to hexagram 11.
Oh, and everything is going all to be all right.
Peace. Oh, conclusion, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Even when they ask the I Ching, what should I do? And they get hexagram 36, they think, oh, hexagram 36, oh, the darkening of the light, but wait, it's turning into hexagram 11. Everything's going to be all right. But that is not what you asked the I Ching. You asked, what should I do? And you got this hexagram as an answer. And that is what I personally have against seeing this hexagram as the future. Because it can be very tempting to focus on that second hexagram if that's more to your liking, if it's a more pleasant hexagram.
But then you also think that people are tend to think the I Ching says the future, and you don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, everything's going to be all right. I mean, I don't have to do anything because here we have hexagram 11. Everything is going to be all right, but that's not how the I Ching works, at least not in my book. So that's a very strong example that I would like to show. So
yeah, and thank you very much for that. There are two topics now going.
Yeah, now you can go back to your presentation.
Yeah, back to my thing. But it's an important thing that you said, because that has mainly has to do with people who throw the working with the I Ching and think they don't have to do anything. No, the I Ching is always about accepting change. Accepting change has to do with relating to the change. That's my belief.
Yeah.
You have to understand the change in order to be the change.
Yeah, exactly. Well, most of the time change is a verb. You have to do something. And by simply not doing anything, then nothing will change. If you just keep doing what you always did, then you will get what you always got. And that. So
so can we relate on I don't know if this is the right word. Qi Gua is changing Gua.
The Drukwa. Yes, the Drukwa. Yeah.
You're the Chinese expert.
Nah.
So that is the second hexagram of this 49.7. Yeah, I come back. This is the ocean where the question arises from, and let it be that. So we can focus back on the real answer, and that is just 49 with 5 moving, changing lines, however you want to call it.
Yes.
We will get back to what we said to those multiple changing lines in another podcast, because that's a podcast on its own.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But let us check on the trigrams. What we see: trigram fire below, trigram lake above. I don't know if people can see that. Yeah. So the lower trigram, I think we're both correct on that. Is that's who we are, the people.
Yes.
That's what you feel inside. This is going on inside. The lower trigram also means, from my perspective of Chinese medicine perspective, this is inside.
Okay. Yes.
And how this inside is working, trigram fire. And the upper trigram is always what we bring out and receive from without.
Okay. Yes.
So
we have internal and external.
Absolutely. And the lower trigram is how things started, and the upper trigram, in my perspective, is how it works out.
Okay.
The outer world.
Good.
Okay. We see trigram fire, but we remember that it is way out of balance. Let us start with balance fire.
Yeah.
Fire is all about connection. Fire is all about, when we translate it to Chinese medicine, the heart and small intestine. It has everything to do with communication, being truthful. When we are truth in our heart, we can communicate truthful from outer heart. Even where we're stuttering or just like me, I don't have a very broad English thing. Just communicate.
No, you're doing okay.
And when things are coming from the inside out, from your own heart, it will be received. But when the heart is distorted, then also the things that come inside will be distorted. There is some sort of misinterpretation. So fire has everything to do with connection. It has to do with relationships. It has to do with the close relationships. The people that we feel that we're connected to. Connection is a very strong fire word. Because it was distorted through the changing lines, we could see everything that had to do with connection, everything that has to do with feeling true to ourselves is a very strong point. And fire is also very proud. And it is ego.
Okay.
Because the heart is also ego. This is my image of the world.
Yes.
So the image of the world was very distorted because there is a revolution going on. In all these cases, revolution is going on. And fire has also to do, from the Chinese medicine, with victimization.
Okay.
So if we feel victimized in ourselves, that's a degree we victimize others. So the pain that we have received from times ago, we will bring on in this time. So a lot of pain of the heart. Because again, it's out of balance, that trigram.
Yeah, we should forget and not forget that this trigram is completely out of balance.
Yeah, all three are fine. So
yeah,
because of that, because when trigram fire is balanced, we know exactly what to say wherever we say it in the right time. So it's about connection and being appropriate.
Yes.
And because it was so out of balance, I thought, okay, we're gonna have a time of way no appropriateness anymore. Because the heart and everything what has to do with it is out of balance. Do you follow me, Harman, on this one?
Yes, definitely.
And then we have trigram lake. Lake likes to talk. Talk, talk, talk. But it's not definitely a very insightful trigram in way of talking. It's spiritual, but it can be superficial.
Yes.
Because this trigram is also quite way out balanced. Two lines of the tree. You got blah, 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 blah. From the heart, which is also distorted. And the revolution is mainly based on big themes, on the masses, on the heart, and on the spirit, because that's are the three lines of the hexagram for me. they were all just way out. You cannot complete a good revolution if you have that connection, because fire needs connection. Fire is truth. Fire is, being honest, being whatever, but be connected. So for me, this was a very interesting answer. There is so much more to tell about it, of course, but revolution for me with fire and metal above. So the lake belongs to Wuxing metal. Fire melts the metal. So there is a battle going on into the outside world, but if we connect to the heart, it will prevail. But there is also a lot of yang going on.
Yes,
a whole
definitely.
lot of yang going on. Let me, well, you already mentioned it early on with nuclear trigrams, so I will go on later on. But whatever you said, the second, third, and fourth, that will be the lower trigram, and the third, fourth, fifth line will be the upper trigram of the nuclear hexagram. And what I want to say is that the third and fourth line is more presence in a nuclear hexagram.
Okay.
And so the third and fourth line in every hexagram is about emotions, the heart stuff. So that's the stuff that we live through. And what we gain from that in this hexagram is hexagram 44, encounter. So we have revolution, army, encounter. That's quite an...
Yes, and with hexagram 44, it's not just a normal encounter. So it's a certain, well, traditionally, it's often described as an encounter with a powerful woman.
Oh.
So it can, hexagram 49 has to do with some sort of power struggle. I think you can't have a revolution without a struggle for power. But it can be a positive revolution if these trigrams would have been in balance, then everything would be fine. Hexagram 44 is about this one yin line which wants to control 5 yang lines, which is also a sort of power struggle. So hexagram 7 is maybe the means that are used during power struggles, something like that. So there is some sort, in all 3 hexagrams, I personally sense some sort of tension.
Yeah, they have a beautiful, I see it as a beautiful drama.
Yeah.
There is some sort of beautiful movie inside of that, and we're living it.
Yes.
But
I do hope this is not from Lord of the Rings, though, with this huge army.
No. Yeah, it's a people's army. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that can be also a fearful army. But when we go back to hexagram 7, yeah, it's fear in the masses, and that combines them. And all the hexagrams around it, especially 44, is about encounter your own anxiety. For me, please be aware of your own anxiety and don't bring it outside. Just keep it there.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Let's go to your thing, or you want to discuss this a little bit further?
You mean about the Baoti or the nuclear trigrams?
Both, I guess.
Yeah, because you did mention the nuclear trigrams now, and that more or less automatically leads to the Baoti trigrams. So if you want, I could give you my take on the Baoti, because there are really interesting things in it.
Yeah, very, very, very. I stop my share.
Okay, yeah, because I personally, I think I do like to have my whiteboard for it, because then I can write and make a complete mess of things. So let me see if I can get back to the whiteboard. I click share screen, and here's the whiteboard again. I do share, and the latest drawing is still there. So, and now you should see my whiteboard.
Yeah.
So let's draw the hexagram here. And you already mentioned the nuclear trigrams, and I'll start with the lowest nuclear trigram. That's this trigram. So we have the lower nuclear trigram wind, which is surrounded by these three lines, the Baoti trigram. And if you put these together, then you get trigram lake. And this is where I find Baoti trigrams fascinating, because they can help you to see certain patterns in a hexagram. We already have seen trigram lake in the hexagram, because it's also the upper trigram. And now suddenly we have this nuclear trigram wind, which is being surrounded by trigram lake. Well, if this upper trigram lake represents something, then that something can also be represented by the Baoti trigram lake. So I always see these as the same, let's say, entity. So we have trigram lake here as an external factor, something outside, which is surrounding this trigram wind. And to me, the Baoti trigrams prevent a nuclear trigram from manifesting itself. So because of this Baoti trigram lake, this trigram wind cannot manifest itself. That's how I personally work with the Baoti. Is that the original way of using Baoti? Well, probably not, because to be honest, we don't really know how Baoti were being used. We don't have any data about that. We only have this idea about the principle, the concept, but how it was used, we don't have any examples for that. Probably the inventor, if he was the inventor, Lin Li, if he would have used it, then he would have used it to explain the text of the I Ching, because that is how all these principles from the hexagram were used. Nuclear trigrams and lines positions, line relationships between trigrams, they were only used to explain the text of the I Ching. They were hardly ever used in practical consultations, in practical usage of the I Ching. So my way of using the Baoti, I must emphasize that, is my personal way of working with the Baoti, and that works for me. And you have a different opinion about that, Johannes, which is excellent. So we can show different ways of using these kind of concepts. But I'll first tell about how I see it. This nuclear of this trigram lake, which represents an outer factor, something from outside. If the trigram fire is us, the people, then there's something outside of that, which is trigram lake, which is preventing trigram wind from manifesting itself. What is wind? Wind has to do with working on the long term, making long, taking small steps, but continuing. But to me, trigram wind is also about proper communication. It's about maintaining the dialogue. Trigram Lake also has to do with communication, but to me, Trigram Lake is more about gossip.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's all these. It's the what's that newspaper called in England? The Sun, I think.
I don't know, but it's
anyway,
a gossip paper.
Yes,
an opinion will do.
Yeah, as long as it is exciting, whether it's true or not doesn't really matter to Trigram Lake, as long as it is exciting and makes you feel good. That's the idea of Trigram Lake. And that idea is more or less compromising Trigram wind.
I can feel this. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, okay.
Proper communication is not possible. And also because the Trigram Lake is quite out of balance, we should still remember that. So there is a lot of emphasis on the hearsay and the how do you can't find the right word, but the exciting part of the whole event, everything that is happening. So
may I interrupt a little bit? Yeah, sure. Because Trigram wind is also for deep research. Wind is research.
Yes, definitely.
And going deep into the details. And so it's involved by Trigram Lake.
Yeah.
Talk.
Yeah, just talk, but it isn't really doesn't lead to anything substantial.
No. So you have the really research against gossip talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and that is part of the answer, of course, that you part of the answer that you got from the I Ching. So that is how I use these Baoti trigrams. We have another Baoti trigram. Let me get another color here. Green. Yeah, why not green? So we have this. Oh, pen isn't working. Where is my pen? Oh, that's it. Oh, look, I can move
what
it.
You're doing, man. Oh, okay.
That's what I
go
want.
Disco.
Interesting. So let's see how I'm going to do this. So as you can see, this is all improvised. I'm just going to. We have that nuclear trigram. What happened to my pencil? It's ridiculous. Anyway, and so we have that nuclear trigram. Look, it's back.
Heaven.
It's back. Heaven, which is being surrounded by these three lines, the Baoti trigram, which is thunder. So we have thunder, which is enveloping trigram heaven. So thunder is preventing trigram heaven from manifesting itself. Well, trigram heaven has to me has to do with leadership, choosing a direction, a goal, taking control, and that's being blocked more or less by trigram thunder. And thunder, when it is about the trigram, is a quite destructive trigram. It's about being aggressive, about wanting quick results. It doesn't really matter what the consequences are of the result, as long as there is result. It always has to be fast with trigram thunder, which, by the way, is completely. It's completely the opposite, by the way, of that nuclear trigram wind, which is already being blocked. So we have the opposite trigram thunder, which is also really fast and aggressive and making loud noises. If there's something very that we have here in the Netherlands, we have the Media Markt. And they make these large advertisements in the newspaper, large letters. Well, that's thunder. Whereas wind would be this little ad in the newspaper, but continuously. And whereas the Media Markt would put one large ad just to get the attention. Thunder wants attention. It wants to be heard.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter in what way it is heard, as long as it gets the attention. And especially, and that is something that you can read in the text of Hexagram 51, which is which is twice trigram thunder, that it speaks of fear. Thunder strikes fear in the people. So fear is something that is also connected to trigram thunder. Well, we also had trigram water in Hexagram 7, which is also fear, but that is more an emotional kind of fear.
Yeah.
And fear that has more to do with things like feelings and maybe even depressions, if you want. But the fear that is connected to trigram thunder is the fear of being, yeah, exactly, and of being scared because of sudden unexpected events. It's like someone who is suddenly smashing the table and which makes you jump up. And that kind of attitude, that kind of principle is blocking trigram heaven from taking leadership and choosing the right goals and moving in the right direction.
Okay.
And that is what is the effect of the virus, because that was your question.
Yeah, I'm fascinated about your the way you see it in this hexagram. Also because I truly understand it in this course of actions, what has arisen in the time. But what I do also see is for me, it's also like a child that can come forward, you know. So the Baoti, I cannot change your things over here, but the thunder.
Well, actually, you should be able to do that.
Okay, but let's not try it out now. But I see thunder as the enveloping trigram for heaven to arise.
Okay.
So what you have drawn here with thunder and heaven is about hexagram 25. So there is some in 25 and also, well,
you mean hexagram 25?
Yeah, so you use only the trigrams, only the developing trigrams, but if you put them together, then you have another trigram, hexagram.
A hexagram. Oh, that's what you mean. So what you're actually doing, because I'm still sharing my whiteboard here, what you're actually doing is you're turning this into one hexagram. Is that what you mean? Okay. Okay, good.
And so you have a different kind of energy layer, but thunder was an enveloping trigram, wasn't it? The Baoti.
Yes, the Baoti. That's the enveloping trigram. That's enveloping trigram heaven. Yes.
But I believe that enveloping trigrams, Baoti, we call it Baoti. We quit the enveloping. Baoti is Bao is also like the womb.
Okay. Yes.
Isn't that also a quite correct translation? Bao.
Yes, that is because of the etymology of the Chinese character Bao. Because the character, let's see if I can draw this more or less by a head. That's the character Bao. Originally it looked something, I think, like this, and then there was something like this inside. And it's often explained as well, that's a picture of a womb, of a fetus in the womb.
Okay.
My drawing skills are terrible, but this is how it more or less should look, I think. And then I'm talking about the form on oracle bone characters, which means there are something around 1000 BC.
And when we talk about T, it's more or less of something that is stable, on which something stands on, isn't it? Something is.
Yeah, well, the character T, which I'm not going to write, it's way too complex for me, but that mainly has to refers to a certain form. because like, for instance, the body is also a T.
Yeah.
The physical body is a T. It is something, it's a certain shape. But it's solid.
It's physical.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Solid.
It's physical, yes.
And for me, the Baoti, when I heard it, okay, so the womb, physical, something it stands on.
Yes. Okay.
So the Baoti, for me, is like, okay, it may be enveloped, but it's enveloped in a womb.
Yeah.
So it can envelop from this. So trigram thunder envelops trigram heaven for me.
Yeah. So you could say the trigram heaven is in the womb of
absolutely
thunder. Of thunder.
And because of there will be uprisings and there will be thunder, heaven will rise at an more stable way.
Okay.
But it's a dangerous combination.
Well, yeah, when look at the family relationships of these trigrams, then we have trigram heaven is the father and trigram thunder is the son. The son traditionally has to follow the father. So we have here two quite powerful, strong, young trigrams.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation over here, but
yes.
with the Baoti, I don't know if. Okay.
Yeah, but that is your way of using the Baoti. You, in my book, this trigram heaven would hardly ever come out. That's how I use the Baoti. Trigram heaven is being restrained by trigram thunder, but you say, on the other hand, that thunder more or less helps trigram heaven to come out, something like that.
In the end, yes.
In the
end, because it's the womb.
Yeah.
It will say you have to come out. You have to change.
Yes. Okay.
But it's quite an aggressive combination, father and first son,
yes,
with quite a load over here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. This idea about the womb and this idea of also trigrams being born, more or less, out of the womb, that might be a good bridge to the history of the Baoti.
To the debunking of it.
Yeah, more on. Yeah, well, no,
yeah, okay.
More or less.
Okay. Go ahead, Harman.
No, it's not really debunking, but it's just I want to put the sentence in the right context, and it's also personally I am to blame for this, because in my Dutch book I wrote a sentence that is being ascribed to Linley, the supposed inventor of the Baoti, who said that the character Bao is that this character Bao means the same as the character Shang. I shouldn't. This should be. Oh, oops. It means the same as the character Shang. There. Bao and Sheng, he supposedly said these are the same. Bao, being the womb, is the same as Shang, bringing to life. Getting things out of the womb. And that's a sentence that I think, if I remember correctly, also mentioned in my Dutch book, in which I discuss the Baoti. I think it's the only book in the Western language that talks about the Baoti, which makes it priceless. So. But anyway, in my book, if I recall correctly, I say that Lin Li says that this character Bao is the same as Shang being born, and he did say that. However, he didn't really say that in the context. I only recently found out he didn't say that in the context of the Baoti. It was a completely different context. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Baoti as far as I could trace it. So now I'm again going to share something here. Let me first start the presentation. So new share, and there we are. You should see now only a sheet with text. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Completely.
Oh, good. Well, it's working. Excellent. So, and what you see here is the entry in Bent Nielsen's book, A Companion to I Ching Numerology and Cosmology. He talks a little bit about the Baoti. And he explains the principle, and he says that Huang Zhongxi, who lived in the Qing dynasty, had made a diagram of it. And I always go back to the source, so I wanted to see which diagram did Huang Zhongxi actually make about the Baoti, and he made this diagram, which I got from a modern reproduction, which has this. Whoops, there we go again. The pen is not always working. So, is that? Yeah, well, there we are. Yeah, that's the title of the book, and it's being edited by Zhang Kebing, which is, by the way, one of the leading I Ching scholars in China. And this is the diagram that Guang Zhongxi made, where it actually says, as an example, here we have trigram heaven, which is surrounding, which is Bao, enveloping, surrounding, in this case here, trigram water. So these two hexagrams are hexagrams in which trigram heaven is surrounding trigram water. And here, the opposite of it is, here we have trigram water, which is Bao, enveloping trigram heaven. So it's just a lookup table that is Huang Zhongxi made for the Baoti. And he also tells a little bit about the origin of the Baoti, and he actually attributed it to Lin Li, who lived around the same time, which probably somewhere around year 1200, I think, lived around the same time as Zhu Xi. Well, Zhu Xi is a familiar name in the I Ching world because the current yarrow stalk method is actually described by Zhu Xi. These stupid rules for working with moving lines, that when you have two moving lines, then you read the upper moving lines. When you have three moving lines, you read the middle moving lines, whatever.
It's from Zhu Xi, or
is also from Zhu Xi. So Zhu Xi is an extremely important figure in the history and philosophy of the I Ching. And his works, and his, by the way, both of his works, the Yi Shui Jimang and the Zhao Yi Benyi, are both translated and are available in English. These became the two major works of I Ching study after his time. So, for instance, in the Zhao Yi Zedong edition of the I Ching, which was used by Wilhelm, the books from Zhu Xi were completely inserted in the Zhao Yi Zedong edition. So he became very influential, and he mainly focused on the text of the I Ching. But Lin Li, who lived at the same time, he was more a Xiangshu figure, working with trigrams and hexagrams and lines, nuclear trigrams. He did a lot with nuclear trigrams. And the Baoti are actually attributed to Lin Li. But the two, they really couldn't stand each other. It was really, they were, well, you could say that they really were each other's enemies.
I love that.
Because there's in the works of Zhu Xi, there is meeting described between Zhu Xi and Lin Li. And this is, I'm not going to read this. This is just for my own. This is just my own notes, so I can remember what I actually need to say. This is actually from the work from Huang Zhongxi, which is mentioned here. Let me get my pencil again because it's disappearing all the time. From this work, which I also showed the yellow cover from, where he talks about the Baoti tool, these charts that he made. And here he describes the discussion between Zhu Xi and Li Huangzhong, which is the other name for Lin Li. And during this discussion, Lin says that, when we talk about the character Bao from Baoti, actually it's the same as Sheng, being born. Bao and Sheng are actually, in reality, it says, they have the same meaning. But Zhu Xi thought that was complete nonsense. And he said, but Zhu Xi said, well, that can't be the same meaning, because when Bao means that a child is inside the mother. And when it's being born, then it is, which is Sheng, then it is outside the mother. Then it's outside. Why? Then it's outside. So I'm afraid it can't be the same, because Bao means that a child is inside, whereas Sheng means being born, it is outside. It can't have the same meaning. So Zhu Xi really didn't agree for one moment with what Lin Li actually said. And that now I'm putting it mildly, because Zhu Xi actually said, I'm not sure if it's mentioned here, but he really said that the work of Lin Li and his ideas were hilarious, were laughable. So, and these two really became quite enemies, even to the point that Lin Li tried to have Zhu Xi, how do you say it, fired from his official position at the court. So they really couldn't stand each other.
That's gruesome.
Yes.
But Harman, if I understand this correctly, were they also enemies in other ways of thinking, like Taoism and Confucianism? Or
yes, as far as I know, but especially there are several. I looked through the works of Zhu Xi, and he mentions Lin Li a few times, and every time he says that he totally doesn't agree with Lin Li. So I suspect it's also when it comes to ideas about Taoism and Confucianism that they also disagree. But to be honest, I didn't really look in that direction. I mainly looked about how Lin Li is being referred to in relation to the I Ching.
Okay,
that was what I was concerned about. But this whole discussion that Zhu Xi and Lin Li actually had about Bao and Sheng actually didn't have anything to do with the Baoti. And that is something that maybe it's even my own personal misinterpretation, I don't know, but that whole idea, what is described here, is mentioned by Huang Zhongxi, and it was actually related to this discussion, which is a famous sentence from the 10 Wings, where it says that in the Shizi, it is said that the Yi has the Tai Yi, which brings forth the Yang Yi, Yin and Yang, the two, whatever, and the two Yin and Yang bring forth the 4 images, and the 4 images, they create
the 8 trigrams.
The 8 trigrams. So, and what it here says is the character Sheng, which means being born, producing. And that is actually what Lin was talking about. He actually said, well, but when it says here Sheng, he said we shouldn't read it as Sheng, but we should read it as being as containing something. So as we should read it as Bao. So the Tai Chi contains Yin and Yang, and Yin and Yang contain the 4 images. So and the 4 images, they contain
the 8 trigrams.
And what he actually meant by that, and that is something which is explained here in this sentence, is that what he actually meant is, well, a hexagram contains, just going to draw quick 6 lines here. We have the 2 primary trigrams, and we have added to that the nuclear trigrams, which makes 4. And when we turn that around, that hexagram, then we can multiply that, and then we have 8 trigrams. And that is how Lin Li interpreted this sentence. He said the Taiji contains the 4 images, etc. And so he linked that sentence only to the trigrams. And that is what Juicy said, that's ridiculous. Juicy literally said that is not the old way of looking at that sentence. And Juicy thought that was completely stupid. But that is actually where this sentence comes from, that the Bao and Sheng are being connected with each other. And originally, it didn't really have anything to do with the Baoti. The whole discussion centered about that sentence, which has to do with this picture. You know, this sentence that we're talking about.
But in essence, it comes from developing, evolving.
Yeah.
I do believe that the nuclear trigrams and what the Baoti, they're connected, but it's like a womb.
Yeah, well, and that idea, that is something that Lin Li wanted to emphasize in his discussion with Juicy, but Juicy didn't buy it, and he thought he thought that Lin Li was completely twisting the words in such a way that they didn't correspond with the traditional way of looking at the Taiji and yin and yang, etc. So he completely ridiculed Lin Li up to the point that everybody ignored Lin Li's work, and it never was very influential. So Juicy, he became the main figure in the field of I Ching study. So, and that's actually the origin of this whole Baoti thing. It's attributed to Lin Li, but actually, as Bent also says here in his entry about the Baoti, he says that term is thought to have originated with Lin Li, although the concept of contained trigrams is absent from Lin Li's surviving work on the changes. And we do have the work of Lin Li, and indeed, Lin Li doesn't talk about the Baoti in his own I Ching commentary. So personally, I have the impression that Huang Zhongxi is actually the person who came up with this idea of the Baoti. But he links it to Lin Li because Lin Li worked with nuclear trigrams, etc. But this is just speculation and hypothesis and assumptions. So anyway.
Fascinating, Harm.
Yeah, also, so that's what we know about the Baoti, and that's of course completely unrelated to the actual usage of the Baoti, and how you use them, that's entirely up to you. You see it as related to a womb, which is actually a very beautiful image. The minute I saw the Baoti, the surrounding enveloping trigram, I immediately saw it as a trigram that is blocking a nuclear trigram. Yeah. And that idea immediately stuck with me. And that's how it works for me. But that's actually how the I Ching works in general, I think. When a certain idea, a concept, a principle hits you in the face and has meaning to you, then that is something that you can use.
By all means, use it.
Yes.
By all means, use it. And that's the way it works. For me, a perfect womb. And also in different kinds of wombs, what I already said. Sometimes it's on Wu Xing side. It can be encouraging, sometimes something different. But it works, and it really is a very great way to look at hexagrams, like what you told with the hexagram 49 to show with the thunder and everything. Yeah, that was really beautiful, Harman.
And I'm curious to know what our viewers think of this. Because with the Baoti, we are actually using three lines within the hexagrams aren't really connected, but with the Baoti, we smash them together and turn them into a trigram. Is that something that our viewers feel comfortable with? Because you could also say, well, it isn't a trigram, that the trigram isn't literally in the hexagram, so you can't use it. It's just a stupid idea to just smash three random lines together and turn them into another trigram. Is that something that is considered acceptable?
Okay, that's a good question.
I'm curious what our viewers think of this, because it's a new concept. Well, not really new in China, but anyway, here in the West. So do our viewers use other similar ideas with hexagons if they're working with hexagon trigrams, etc.? How creative can you get with the hexagram?
We're pleased to know.
Yes.
So throw your lines on the chat. We will listen to it and we respond to it if we can.
Yes.
But thank you, Harman. It was pleasant again.
Yes, thank you, Johannes. It was a great evening again.
And
it's always fun talking about I Ching with you.
Oh, always a pleasure. And thank you for listening, and throw it in the chat.
Yes. And see you all the next podcast. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Ta-da!